Hi there, this is a short video aimed at faculty members implementing engineering design courses. In this video, we're going to talk about the types of agreements that may be required for students in your course to sign or that may be presented to you as the faculty member in charge of the course. I'm Bryce Pills and I teach at the law school in a program called the Entrepreneurship Clinic. The first point I'd like to make is that various members of the university have put together a toolkit for faculty members involved in student design courses. And in this toolkit, we have a number of form agreements that can be used in implementing these courses and a decision tree to help you select what's the most appropriate agreement to be involved for students that are taking part in a project that's sponsored either by an external sponsor or an internal sponsor of the University of Michigan. And this faculty toolkit is far and away the best source of the current information and guidance for you on the topic of agreements for the students or yourself to sign in implementing an engineering design course. I'm just going to give you a general overview of the types of documents that could be involved. Let's first talk about the types of agreements that may be presented to students. For an internal sponsored project, by that I mean a project that's brought to you by an engineering or by a University of Michigan faculty member and therefore sponsored by the University of Michigan, the holder of the intellectual property rights in that project, you have a couple considerations. The first is there any need for the students to enter into a confidentiality agreement or in any way to transfer their intellectual property rights to the University of Michigan in exchange for participating in that project? Generally speaking, this conversation should involve the faculty member that's bringing the project to your course, the tech transfer office that may be familiar with this project and what rights will be needed to potentially commercialize the project, and in some cases, the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs. If it's decided by everyone involved that there's no need for the students to sign any sort of confidentiality or intellectual property license or assignment agreement, and everyone is comfortable with the students owning any resulting intellectual property from this project, then there's generally speaking no need to have the students sign any sort of legal agreement. It is worth noting that there still can be a chance for intellectual property disputes because students will individually own their intellectual property rights, and especially in a team-based project, you may therefore have multiple joint owners of intellectual property and a need for the students to understand the rules involved in intellectual property ownership and to understand their options, rights, and responsibilities at the end of the course in deciding who's going to carry on with this project. In that case, there's a document called the Play Nice Letter that was developed by an engineering faculty member several years ago that outlined these rules of engagement for students. And this is generally a nice letter for the students to be presented with to help them understand the rules of intellectual property ownership and their rights and obligations at the end of a semester, even in the case where the students aren't otherwise being presented with any sort of legal agreement to sign with the sponsoring party. In the situation where it is determined that the student should sign some sort of confidentiality or intellectual property license or assignment agreement, then it should be worked out between the faculty member, the tech transfer office, and in some cases the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs, what's the appropriate agreement for the students to sign, and that's the agreement that should be presented to the students. Generally speaking, a confidentiality agreement is going to be one where the students agree to keep confidential, sensitive information that's disclosed to them related to the technology or business aspects of the project. An intellectual property license is going to be one where the students license to the University of Michigan as the internal sponsor rights in the intellectual property. The students will maintain their ownership, but they give the university rights to use the intellectual property created during the course of that project by the students. An intellectual property assignment is going to entirely transfer to the University of Michigan the intellectual property rights created by the students during the course of that project. Now let's talk about external sponsored projects and agreements that may be presented to students. Again, if it's determined that everyone's comfortable with the students owning their intellectual property rights created during the course of the project and not having any confidentiality obligations, then there's no need for the students to sign a confidentiality or intellectual property license or assignment agreement. Generally speaking, the current view is that this type of external sponsored project would be handled under a gift arrangement, and that can be handled through the development office at the University of Michigan to outline the relationship with this external sponsor, but the students would not have to sign any sort of agreement. If the external sponsor does desire, and you as the faculty member are comfortable with the students being required to sign either a confidentiality or intellectual property transfer agreement in order to participate in the project, then there is going to need to be a document that is signed by the students prior to them working on this course. And that document is either going to be a confidentiality agreement, an intellectual property license, or an intellectual property assignment agreement, or some combination thereof. And again, the students will have to sign that legal agreement before they begin working on the project. Now let's talk briefly about agreements that may be presented to you as the faculty member involved in a design course. Sometimes an external sponsor will realize that the students are signing agreements in their personal capacity, but that you as the faculty member may also be involved in handling the company's confidential information or developing the intellectual property, and the sponsor may want you as a faculty member to sign either a confidentiality or an intellectual property license or assignment agreement. Generally speaking, University of Michigan faculty have limited signatory authority when it comes to University of Michigan business issues. So this would be a situation where you would not want to sign that document without talking to the Office of Tech Transfer, the Office of General Counsel, or in some cases the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs to understand whether it makes sense for that agreement to be signed in the first place, and if so, whether you're the appropriate person to sign it. In most cases, it's either going to be the Tech Transfer Office or the Office of Research and Sponsored Programs that has signatory authority for a document governing confidentiality and intellectual property rights of a U of M faculty member related to that faculty member's work or research here at University of Michigan. So talk to someone before signing that agreement, because it may not be appropriate for you to sign that document. Also, in many cases, we can avoid that document having to be signed. For example, in some cases, you as the faculty member aren't going to be involved in developing any intellectual property and don't actually need to see the company's confidential information. There may be ways to set up a procedure where the students are getting access to the company's confidential information, but they're scrubbing any documents of that confidential information before they turn them over to you as the faculty member. So there may be ways we've figured out to simplify the process and reduce the number of legal agreements that need to be involved in setting up this course. And that has been a general overview of the categories of documents that may be involved in setting up your engineering design course, whether for students to sign or that you may be presented with by an external sponsor. We're talking about the patent case between Gillette and Energizer Holdings, dealing with Gillette's progressive blade technology incorporated into its Mach 3 line of razors.